Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode, I don't even know anymore, of How to Become a Football Coach. I hope everyone's well. I've got a really good guest from the other side of the world jumping on the call today. It's been a long process trying to get this person on, but I'm glad it's here now, and yeah, big things to come. So I'll let him introduce himself to everyone, and yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah, Martin Rennie, coach of the Indy 11, team over in America in the United Soccer League Championship. So yeah, from Scotland originally, but currently living in America. And over the last few years, I've coached all over the world. So we'll probably get talking about that, I'm sure.
I was going to say, that's not very much of a strong American accent.
Yeah, no, thankfully, not lost my accent too much. Obviously, it's probably dulled down a little bit. Whenever I go back home, everyone says I sound American, but obviously here, everyone thinks I sound Scottish. So yeah, it's always that little thought in your mind when you use a word that you can't imagine you would ever use, and your brain doesn't really like it, but you have to use it to be understood at times. But
I was going to say, it's not as strong as some of the Scottish managers I spoke to. But no, so let's talk about, really, Martin, where did your kind of coaching journey begin? When did you start playing football? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I always played football, like right from when I was a kid, and always really, really enjoyed it. And always was like interested in, like, you know, even when I was a kid, we would sometimes, one of my mates would get a team together and I would get a team together and we'd play against each other, or things like that. So I was always interested in like picking teams and that type of thing. I remember when I was quite young in primary school, like setting up a Sabutio league for all my mates.
Love that.
Have home and away games and go around to people's houses. And we had a league table and all that, so it was good fun. But yeah, I've always just really loved football, loved watching it, loved playing it. Obviously now I really love coaching it. But when I was about 16, maybe, I was in an organisation called the Boys Brigade, and we had a football team on that, and it was like a five-a-side team. And I basically played in that team, but also was like the player coach. At least I took that role upon myself. And we won the Scottish Championships, we went to the British Championships and stuff. So that was probably my first real kind of coaching or managing experience, if you like. And then when I was playing, I played mainly part-time football, but was also, you know, helping sometimes to coach because I was doing my coaching licenses. And while I was working in business. I kind of learned about the mindset it takes to be successful at something. So I learned a lot about setting goals and having confidence, and basically that you can't outperform how you see yourself. So if you see yourself as like not really good enough to be a coach or a top coach or whatever, then you can't outperform that. You're not just going to get lucky and stay lucky forever. So the way that you view yourself is really important in business, in life, in anything. And so I kind of came to the decision that if I could do whatever I wanted to do, what would I do? And I decided I'd want to be a football manager or football coach. And so I started working towards the goal of becoming a coach. And I had the goal in my head of retiring from work at the age of 30 to start coaching, which is kind of my hobby. And so I started working backwards from that point. So I was like, okay, well, what would I need to do in order to be a coach at that point? So I'd need to get qualified, right? I'd need to get my badges. I'd need to get my coaching licenses. I would need to know certain people. I'd need to have certain network going on. I would have to, have a number of things in place to become a coach. And then I just started working on those things like for, a few years. And in my holidays from work, I would go and I would do a coaching license. I did all the way up from the very bottom, right up to the top. I even did the goalkeeping licenses and everything. So worked all the way up to doing those licenses, and then got the chance to start coaching in America when I was about 30 years old, and did well, and then it just kind of took off from there.
You speak about, obviously, that's kind of a good thing. You spoke about kind of like the mindset and how you view things. I read something recently around Brendan Rodgers and how he uses that kind of mindset and leadership when building a squad. For example, he always looks for 4 key players, a young player to fit a mold, an older experienced pro, so X, Y, Z. Was that quite hard for you to imagine? Obviously, you grew up in Thurso, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
What was that? What is that like in Thurso? Obviously, I'm not actually aware of where it is in Scotland, but was that hard to think in your head? And were you like telling like your parents, your friends that I am going to become a football manager one day because I'm doing X, Y, and Z? And did they look at it like, who are you? You're Martin from Thurso, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think, first of all, I was born in Thurso, but I actually grew up in a tiny, tiny little village called Betty Hill, which even people from Thurso probably don't know where Betty Hill is. But certainly people in Scotland don't, until recently, maybe haven't heard of it. So I grew up in like a village where there was only really probably 5 or 6 kids in my class at school in the whole year group.
Wow.
So, there was probably 3 or 4 year groups in the same room, like primary 1, 2, 3, and 4 were in the same classroom. So it was a very small place, and it was mainly just little small farms, crofts. They're called sheep farms, basically. And so I grew up around those. And also, the other thing was everybody loved playing football. So even the girls would play because there wasn't that many kids playing. So we all used to play football, and just like always loved it. And like, my dad loved football. He played, and he was a big fan of it. And so it was just something we always did. And so I wasn't at that point talking about becoming a manager, but I always probably wanted to be a player.
Yeah.
And so when I was 10 years old, I moved to the central belt of Scotland, and then it was more opportunities then to be a player and to do that. So when it came to the point of wanting to become a coach or become a manager, I wasn't necessarily going telling a lot of people that was what I was going to do, because sometimes when you do that, people just put you off and they tell you can't do it and you're not possible. And that can be quite good motivation sometimes, but it can also lose you confidence sometimes as well, especially if it's somebody that's well-meaning, but someone who you really respect and who you think is right, who you think has a good perspective. So a lot of times I think it's good if you've got big goals to not necessarily, I know some people say, oh, tell people, and maybe if there's the right support group, then do that. But I think a lot of times just have it in your own mind, right? This is what I want to do. How am I going to do it? If people don't think I can, that's all right. I can use that as motivation, but I also don't want to get sidetracked, because basically I had a really good job, and I was, in that position where I had a house, a couple cars, lots of things going on, wife, kids. And it makes it quite hard to leave that to start coaching, because you've got to start at the very bottom, and you're not making the same money that you were when you were working. And I was on a pathway. If I wanted to be a managing director of a company, I would have been, or that I was doing well, and it was a good pathway and a good career. But I believe if you want to do anything, it's possible if you put the right effort. And I'm not saying you can become maybe, I don't know, play in the NFL if you've not got the physical capabilities. Yeah. But there's lots of things that are more possible than you think, and lots of things that can be done if you really are committed to it. But also, going back to the initial point, you have to believe that you're the kind of person who can do that. And if you're not, then you have to become the kind of person that can do it. So I think that's more important almost than your ability and your knowledge. It's your self-image, your belief that you can make it happen. And so I was making that part of my mentality stronger and stronger. And so, I remember once meeting someone who respected a lot, and I was telling him I had got my UEFA B license, and I was telling him I'm going to go for the A, and he was saying, "Oh, you'll not get the A. They only give that to the national team players and the full professionals. You won't get it." And I used that as a little bit of motivation, but I had enough confidence from the other interactions I'd had with other people to believe that I could do it. And I remember, I think it was one of my coaching licenses. I met a player who was really well respected in Scotland, John Collins, and he was playing for Monaco and Everton and Celtic and so on. And he introduced me once to someone, and he said, "This is Martin. He's the best young coach in Scotland." And that was the type of thing that then gave you that belief and gave you that confidence that maybe you are able to do it. And whether he meant that or not, it gave me a good boost. He was on one of my coaching courses, and we got to know each other a bit. So just things like that, it's interesting. And then I've taken that with me as a coach. It's like, give people a reputation to live up to. Like, tell people, like, say, this guy's going to be really good, or tell them how important they are to your team, and tell them how much you're really glad that they're with you and that you need them. rather than always pointing out what they can't do and what they're not good at. And so trying to build confidence and perspective and that self-image, I think, is something that if you spend too much time telling people what you want to do or what you're going to do, they might take away from your belief rather than add to it.
I think I was going to say, you look at so many young coaches, and even younger than myself, but coaches in general, like you said, you were at 30 in a very good job, very, very well paid job. But to say or to physically be like, no, I'm going to come out of that and I'm going to make, I don't know, 80% less than what I was on. It's a massive thing. And I think, like you said, it's so many coaches or people that you meet that are coaches per se, they'll say, oh, I want to do this, this and this. Do it. Like, it's one thing saying it, but like you said, you've gone a very different pathway from basically having everything in day-to-day life than to having, or come back down to reality and work our way up. So did that, obviously what you said there, how did you get your first break from Scotland, then going to America? Because obviously, as everyone will know, you never played professional level, anywhere. So what, was that kind of a stumbling block when first reaching out to clubs, or how did you get over that stumbling block and then come to America?
Yeah, so I started off playing in America for a team called the Charlotte Eagles, which was a professional team. So there was a couple of years I was there. But when I was there, I made a lot of friends, a lot of connections. And years later, a bunch of those guys, or one of those connections, was going on a tour of, like a soccer tour, a humanitarian tour to Africa. Nice. And I was working my normal job, and they were going to Mozambique, South Africa, and Sudan. And they were going to play against the national teams of those countries, and they were going to play other professional teams and so on. And I was still playing like semi-professional or part-time, if you like. And so I went on that trip, and it was amazing. It was really a life-changing trip, because it kind of made me go like, yeah, I do want to do what I'm passionate about doing and what I want to do in my life that I love doing, as opposed to just working and then looking back and going like, oh, well, that was, I made money, but I didn't necessarily do what I wanted. So I remember going on that trip, and we were on this long bus trip. It was one of many long bus trips. And I was sitting next to a guy who was the executive director of like a small club in America. And I'd just finished doing my A license, and we had a long talk, and he just eventually was like, look, would you be interested in coming over and being the manager and coaching the team? And I was probably at that moment like, yeah, that's what I want to do. Then the reality of what that actually meant, starts to sink in. But thankfully, I got that chance. And really, my career, a lot of it along the way, it's like, you can't say, oh, it was like this strategic plan, or I had this agent who managed things or ripped up trees. It was just like, it's gone in a way where like I believe that God's in control. And I think that there's things that have come up along the way that only he could have really maneuvered. And so I ended up taking that opportunity, and from there a whole lot of other doors opened up and have continued to over time.
And do you think that, like you said, kind of in God's hands there, do you think, and I say it a lot to a lot of people, like some of the guests I've had on the show and some of the things I've done so far in my coaching career, and people say, oh, you were so lucky to get that. Oh, I was just really lucky. But what, like you said, they don't see that you've been up every Sunday for the last 10 years. You've been doing this, you've been doing that, you've been doing your coaching badges, all this different stuff. And do you think that's the side of coaching people don't see, and they just kind of see Martin, the coach, now? They go, oh, it's been easy.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you've got to be ready when the opportunity comes along. Because even like, let's say when I got that opportunity, if I'd taken that job and we lost every game, that would be the end of it, So I had to be prepared. I had to be ready. And I'd put in the groundwork. I'd been studying, reading, thinking. I had all my ideas, and now it was just a case of whether they would work or not. And obviously they don't all work, but you then have to hope that most of them are accurate. And I think that there's a really good quote by a basketball coach called John Wooden, who's regarded as one of the best coaches ever, although not probably outside of America, but he was a basketball coach at UCLA, and they won many like national titles back to back, which is very difficult to do. And he said that it took him like 20 years to become an overnight success. And I think that's a good quote, because I think if you want to be good at coaching, there's lots of work that goes on behind the scenes. And then when you get your chance, you need to be ready. Like you're not going to get too many opportunities and so you have to try and do well when that chance comes. And so that's something I always think about, is like learning, getting better, trying to improve, and being an overnight success takes a long time. And I think, like it's there can be a certain amount of like, oh wow, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But there's also a certain amount of like, you're working towards it. You don't know what door will open, but you're thinking, right, that's where I want to get to. This is how I'm going to do it. And obviously results in any job, but certainly in coaching, make a big difference and open a lot of doors and
Definitely.
close doors.
So did you end up taking that job? And was that with Cascade?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cascade Surge. Yeah.
What was like, talk us through that first day, and what, to the people obviously in the UK listening and everywhere else, what kind of level is that at in the UK standard, just so people can get a picture? And what was it like your first day going in?
Yeah, so it was it was, the level is basically like the best college players in America play in this league. It was called the PDL. It's now called USL2.
Yep.
So there's a lot of really, really talented players, guys who are going to play in the MLS or going to play in the USL, but they're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically it's like kind of the best young players in the country, mainly almost all of them are under 23. It's the best young players in the country are basically playing in a league against each other. And
so would you say it's like all kind of Category 1 English teams, players thrown in a league type thing?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, something like that. Probably that would be a fair way of looking at it. You'd get guys who are playing for, the under 21s or under 20s of the US national team or other national team countries. Mm-hmm. You've got guys from all over the world who are there playing college, but really are professional level players. So yeah, it'd be like that. The elite level young players playing in the league. So it was a pretty good place to start. And yeah, I think the first day, which I've never done this on the first day since this, but I think on the first day I did like a 2-mile running test. Just so I could be like, right, what are these guys actually like mentally, and what are they like fitness wise? And I remember it was like unusually like rainy and wet and not very nice day, and they were on the running track. And I remember it was one of the players was from, I think, Zimbabwe, and he didn't really grasp what was going on, so he was out there with his boots and his shin guards on. Ran it faster than anyone, like he was ready, just about lapping people. But I don't really know why I even did that, but I think it just gave me like a starting point of like, we're going to have to work hard, and I need to know who's fit and who isn't fit. And I think they all did it well enough where I was like, look, we don't need to do a lot more running now. I just wanted to know, and now we'll do most of it with the ball, or all of it with the ball. And then kind of got them back on side. So in retrospect, it was a bit of a risky start, but it worked out.
Would you say that's definitely kind of going on that first day and seeing things for what it is? And obviously, if people don't know in the UK, I would definitely say soccer in America, the kind of the facilities, the kind of the way it's perceived out there. Obviously, I know it's not the number one sport, but the kind of level and what they play at, but the facilities you're in, the environment, everyone out there takes it so professionally. Was that a kind of big kind of shock for you when you first went out there and you were like, oh wow, like this isn't like obviously Premier League, but.
So remember, the first time I went out there was years before as a player. So that actually was definitely the case. Like I remember coming back and being on trial with clubs in Scotland, and that was when I decided to go into business, because I was like, the lifestyle I had as a very low level player in America was like the lifestyle of a Premiership player compared to coming back to like training in these facilities, in these circumstances where you're like going to the stadium, getting changed, driving for miles and miles, clearing off the pitch, putting up the goals. Like it was just like, I just didn't want to. I was just like, this isn't what I. It's not like what I've been doing for the last couple of years on immaculate fields with balls with the right pressure, so you're not like knocking yourself out when you head it, and going to the gym and the pool in the afternoon. It was just totally different. So I think that was something when I went over to coach the Cascade Surge, I already knew the facilities would be good, and we had like access to a great gym. We had great training facilities. We had all these things that you wouldn't normally have. And even now here, like the club I'm at in the USL, like our facilities are just out of this world. We've got 3 full-size indoor pitches. We've got multiple outdoor AstroTurf and grass fields, grass pitches that are just ours, that are just in incredible condition. We've got access to cryotherapy and float tanks and nutritionists and all sorts of things that it really is, in that respect, elite level. And so it does allow you as a coach the best opportunity to be successful.
And like you said, it definitely kind of fits with the kind of how you're thinking as well, kind of that mental state that I am here for a reason, I'm good at this is what I want to do. So you obviously spent a little bit of time at the Cascade, then you went off to Cleveland City, and then you went off to the Carolina Railhawks, that's what I'm reading correctly. You're at 2 years in each. To the people that don't know, is that the same kind of level as the Cascades? Were they like in the USL 1 or 2?
One was a level up. So Cleveland was pretty cool because we started that club from scratch and we built the whole team. And Amazing. We actually, in the course of 2 years, we only lost 1 game at home. We only lost 3 games overall. We won the championship and multiple players went up to the next level, including me as a coach. And the next club, I was there for 3 years. And it was, again, just incredible facilities. It's where the US national team often go to train. Like when we would recruit them, they would walk down the steps and they would almost, everyone to a man would kneel down and touch the grass to see if it was real. And we've had people like, I remember Steve Nicol, who used to play for Liverpool, his team came and played us. And he's like, this is the best pitch I've ever seen. Like, this is better than. And so the facilities were just great. And I just felt that was a club that was underperforming. And so I felt like this is a club we could really build. And we went on to become really the best club in the country outside of MLS, and won a lot of things and did well. Again, developed a lot of players. And then that opened up the door to go to MLS. So basically it was like 5 years from starting at the lowest level to get into the MLS, which no one's ever done that before, where they've worked through the pyramid here.
Yep.
Top. So that's given me good experience and also helped me really appreciate what I've got, because, in the early days I was maybe driving the minivan through the night to get home from the game, whereas, later on you're on sometimes chartered flights or certainly sitting back on the bus. So, but it reminds you of like what it took to get there, and therefore how much you need to make the most of it now that you've got a lot more to be using it to your advantage.
Definitely. And obviously you speak about your time working up the leagues, and for people that don't know, obviously in America they don't have a promotion and relegation side to it, which we will get to eventually, because I find it very bizarre sometimes. And you look at the progression obviously of your career, and like you said, it's very, very different. At what point, at any point in that time, did you think like you actually are going to be able to move up to the MLS? Like, you may be thinking that, but did you actually ever think, it will actually happen, or this is kind of where I'll stay because people will look at me as a, I don't know, USL Championship coach or USL 1?
Yeah. So at that point, it never happened where a USL coach had gone into the MLS or been, recruited. And we definitely established ourselves as a good team. We'd played a lot of MLS teams in like friendlies and in cup competitions, and we'd often done well. We'd often beaten them. We'd often played Mexican teams as well, really good teams, and beaten them as well and done well. So we were establishing a good reputation. And in my 3rd year in Carolina, we started, like, we had a really good team and we were winning a lot. So we kept winning. And again, like going back to one of my initial points, which is like some things happen in a way that you could never really plan them out, but you believe that it's possible and you're working towards it. So you don't really know how it'll come together, but somehow looking back, it does. So I was at training. I'd finished training one day and went out just outside my office, and the US national team were training, and there was a couple guys watching the training, and they were part of the Montreal Impact, who were going to be a new franchise in the MLS. And I just was standing next to them. I knew them, and I got talking to them, and I just said, look, any chance of an interview for the job? And they said, yeah. And we went for dinner that night, and then they invited me up to Montreal, and they actually offered me the job. And in the meantime, my team kept winning. We won like 13 games in a row, which at that time was a record in US soccer, because it's so hard to do that because the travel is so far. So to go like from one time zone and one climate to another and keep winning, it's hard. And even Steven Gerrard, when he was over in MLS, he commented on how hard the travel was, and it really does make a difference. So we kept winning. And then at the same time, I got offered the Vancouver job, and so just worked through it and decided to take that Vancouver one. So I think when my team kept winning and winning and winning, and then I was in conversations with MLS teams, I think that was more when I really thought it was possible. But just maybe like a few months before that, when I was watching MLS games, that's when I really wanted it to happen. Like that's when I was like, right, I really want to be there, and that's when I felt like it was coming.
And I think it needs to be said more often, because to hear that, and very similar to myself, and like we said earlier, you make your own luck. People don't see the things you do behind closed doors. But to anyone that's listening or watching, if you want something, and I'm telling you this now, the amount of things that have happened to me, and like you said, have happened to you, you're stood in the right place at the right time, or you know the right person who knows John, who knows this, who knows this, who knows that. Can I have an interview for the job? What's the worst thing they're going to say? No.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to when you say it to people, and you probably had it as well. Oh, what do you mean? Oh, like you said you want this, and it's just crazy to think that people don't do that. But I think one thing definitely want to talk about your time at Vancouver, and correct me if I'm wrong. When the season before you left, was it you missed out on the playoffs, 3 points off the playoffs, and wasn't it the highest points they ever had? Is that correct? Or
yeah. So basically, I think it was only like 1 point off the playoffs.
Okay.
But it was only 9 points from first. And when I joined the club, they were, I think, 45 points from first. So in 2 years, we made the playoffs, first ever Canadian team to do that, and then we became a real contender, but just short on that one. We were a bit unfortunate because a key player for us, Jay Demerit, who played in England for Watford and played for the national team for the US, he was our captain and our centre back, and in the first game of the season, he got a season-ending injury. So that in MLS, that hurts you because you can't really replace a player because they're taking up part of your salary cap, so you don't have the money to do it. So, but we had a really good team. We had a striker who was the highest goal scorer in MLS. We played really exciting football, attacking football. You know, left ourselves open a little bit, but entertained and did well.
I was going to say, I've got it here. It says, I can't actually remember who said the quote, but I've written it down that Vancouver. Someone said this at the time. Vancouver play like there's everything on the line. Like you said, they leave yourselves open, but you were branded as the stylish team of the MLS. You were branded as the fast, the kind of European version in the MLS. And a lot of people will say, oh, the American is slow and all this stuff. And I think definitely by seeing that with yourselves, and obviously you brought over a very British kind of a couple members of the team, obviously Kenny Miller, Nigel Rio-Coker, O'Brien, I believe. What was that? Obviously, it's not an accident, but what was your thinking behind that, bringing in those type of players? Like you going on your first day, and like you said, you looked at in your first ever job, you made them run to see where they were at. At what point as a coach do you look at the team and go, okay, I need this because of this? How hard is that is the difference in winning and losing games, do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously for me, I have a way that I want to play, and then as a result of that, I have a kind of profile of what I would like the player to be like in each position, what things they need to be able to do. Vancouver, when I went there, it was really only 1 year from its first year in the MLS. So in its first year, it was one of the worst teams ever in the MLS history. It was certainly way below the other teams. So it didn't really have a training facility yet, didn't have a scouting department yet, didn't really have the infrastructure. And so part of it was I was just trying to find some players that I knew a little bit about, that I thought were playing at a good level, that other people I knew them. So in an ideal world, a club of that size, you would have more of an infrastructure for scouting, and they would say, here's all the options you've got, who would you like? But it wasn't like that. So it was more just trying to build as good a team as I could with the resources that I had. And those guys that you mentioned, they did well for me. And we had a number of others that wouldn't be well known to people back in the UK, but they were really good players and did really well for us. A lot of guys that we think we got the most out of. So it was exciting times, and we did really well. I think that the club's not really pushed on much from there in all the time since then, and maybe gone back a little bit in some ways in terms of the results. And certainly the excitement of how we played, I think people in Vancouver really liked that. They liked the kind of attack-minded football, and it was fun to watch, I think. So it was a good time, and I learned a lot. But then it also led to the first ever time in really my whole working career where I wasn't really on that upward, like for the first time, I didn't get kept on. I think it was really, really harsh, and I think all the fans really majority thought the same. But at the same time, it causes you to reflect and go like, okay, well, how do you deal with disappointment? How do you deal with, let's say, failure? Because for so long now, you've really had success, and then of course that opened up other doors. But as you probably talk about going to Korea, so it was a good time. It's a great city, amazing fan base, great owner. So lots of things that were really good about it, and then some things that you have to remember. I was only about maybe 34, 35 when I was in that job, so I was quite young to be doing that, to do that role. And so now I look at it and go like, okay, I would have done this and this differently, and I'd have been able to manage that more effectively, and I'd have been able to do this in a different way. But at the same time, I also had a lot of confidence, which sometimes that can actually be a positive thing. It can overcome certain naivety, if you like, that you don't know the answer to certain things. So now it's about having that knowledge, but also still having that same old confidence, because if you get both together, that's when I think you can have most success.
Talking, obviously, like you said, with the success and kind of that kind of, when you look at it, fairly inexperienced kind of way of going about it, and that obviously helped with playing attacking football. Can you name a time as a coach? Obviously, so many people have this, and I have it, and coaches, no matter if you're coaching grassroots in the middle of nowhere to obviously the MLS, when you have kind of conflict with not picking a player, or conflict during half time and players are going at each other, or there's an argument or something, how, if you can share a time where this has happened, it'd be great. How did you then go about that? And looking back on it, would you change it?
I think like conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that if there's no conflict or no friction at all, sometimes that's a bad sign, because maybe like there's a lack of intensity and a lack of competitiveness. Because in the season, you're always going to have ups and downs. Not every game is going to go exactly the way you want, and you might even be finding it hard when you're halfway through the game. But that might be, it might be celebrating at the end of the game if you get things right at halftime. So I think that conflict's just a little bit part of it. You don't want to go looking for conflict, but you also have to be clear on like, this is the standard that we accept, and this is what has to happen. And if it's not reached, we have to get not consequences so much as like, here's what's expected. If you fall short of that, you have to do something about it. And so you have to be like that and be strong in those situations. It's not just about coaching as in, here's my style of play, here's my idea, let's build confidence and go. You have to manage difficult situations and sometimes difficult people in a way to try and get the most out of them. And I think usually when people know that you're doing your best to help the team win, then they get that, and I think they help that. But there's all sorts of situations of conflict and aggression that you just kind of have to manage based on what happens in that moment, I think.
No hair dryer treatments then?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think that you have that to be able to really make your point. But if you do that all the time, then it doesn't really probably have too much power. And you also have to be yourself. If you're not like a ranter and raver, you don't want to try and act like you're that, because people do it. So you just have to be yourself, and not everyone will like it, but you have to be okay with that.
And what's your time at Vancouver? So we spoke about a couple of players that you brought in. Who was the best player in that team, would you say, during that whole time you were there? Who was the standout player that hopefully the Vancouver fans, if they're watching, will be able to know, like, oh yeah, that really was the star-out player. Not just in the games, but in training as well. Yeah,
the best player probably was Camilo Sanviso. And basically when we got there, he wasn't playing too much at first, but then it was a little bit of that self-image thing, like, let's give this guy a bit more confidence. He's got tons of ability. And then we changed his position a little bit. He got a little bit fitter. And then he was amazing. He was scoring all sorts of goals. He was up for the Puskas Award, which is the goal of the year. Yeah, he was up for that. And he could score free kicks. He could beat people and score. He scored like a bicycle kick. You could look online, Portland Timbers, Vancouver versus Portland Timbers, Camilo Sanviso. It's an amazing goal. But lots of others. So he was really good. And Kenny Miller was good for him. Kenny made lots of good movements and worked hard. That gave this guy a lot of space, and he went on to then play in Mexico and has had a really big career there. He was on the verge, I believe, of the national team of Brazil, and then tore his ACL. So he was a really, really good player. He came back from the injury and everything, but there was lots of good ones, but I think he was in my mind, the standout. And yeah, he like I say, he's the top goal scorer in MLS that year, amongst people like, Robbie Keane, Thierry Henry, Marco Di Vaio. So he was good.
And do you think, obviously, with those type of players that you brought in and kind of giving confidence to players like you just mentioned, giving those confidence, how hard is that to go into a team? Obviously, I know it's newly founded in Vancouver at the time, but how hard was it to kind of go in there and change the mentality from the classic Klopp, from doubters to believers? How hard did you find that, especially in like your kind of biggest job yet?
Yeah, I think that's maybe this biggest strength that I think I've got, is like changing the culture and the mentality of an organization. And if you look at my career, I've taken over teams that either didn't exist before or that were terrible before, that were, the worst team in their league before, in Carolina and in Vancouver and in Indy. And I feel like that's one of the things I've been able to do, is hopefully taking some of the ideas from what I learned in business, also hopefully being a positive person who works hard and who tries to do the right thing. So I feel like that was the area that I was able to help the most, is helping to change the mindset. I work a lot on that. I've studied psychology quite a bit, and I have some things that I work through to just try and help people see themselves in a more positive light, because all of us see ourselves based on our past experiences or what people have told us. And that might not actually be accurate, because we've all got talents, we've all got ability. And if we could play to our full potential or work to our full potential, then what we could do is much, much higher than we're currently doing. So I think just trying to help them see that, and then give them a really clear way of playing, really strong, organized way of playing, really clear tasks for every player. Just focus on the process of what we got to do, but believe in a positive outcome and go after it. And we didn't, not like we won every game, but we instantly started winning. The club had never won an away game in its entire history in the MLS. And in our first game, we won away from home. So we just started picking things off and moving forward. And we won like the Cascade Cup. In the first year I was there, we won the preseason tournament with all the other MLS teams in it. So we instantly went from losing to winning, and then that helps to gain momentum. And in that first year we were flying, and then there was a few changes that were made to like the squad, and we lost our way a little bit, but we still made it into the playoffs. So we were the first ever Canadian team to do that. But yeah, I felt like we were on a pathway there to become one of the dominant teams in that league. And I think it's a missed opportunity for the club and for me too.
Do you find that kind of hard to kind of look back on and think what could have been that time frame? Because I look at a lot of coaches now, not just in the MLS but everywhere, they'll kind of go in there and they'll be that kind of stubborn, this is the way I want to play and that's it. I've not got the players. I tried to get the players. I haven't got them. And I'm just going to do it anyway. And did you kind of do that moving into your time there? Did you kind of try and embed your philosophy slowly? As obviously, if people don't know, if you want to tell them how the kind of the transfers work, and like you said, if one of your players gets injured, you can't just, oh, here you go, let me sign someone else.
Yeah, I think you have to be smart enough to work with the players you've got, so you have to make adjustments. But your general idea of how you want to play, I think you have to try and implement that to some extent. You might adjust it and have flexibility in certain situations, but if you don't do any of what you believe in, then I think it'd be hard to get anywhere. So, you have to work on it in terms of a process to get into where you want to get to, but that takes a little bit of time to do that. So in MLS, it's actually very, very difficult to recruit, because some of the most important players in an MLS team are those that are domestic American players who know the league really well and who've been there. And any club that has a good player like that, they're not going to give them up. So it's very, very hard to get a good player from another team. And then players from outside of the league, you have to, at least you did when I was there, I think you still do, you have to file what they call a discovery on a player. So like, if there's a player that someone says, hey, look, there's this player, I don't know, in Honduras that would be available for MLS, then we have to say, right, we'll put him on our discovery list. We can have 10 players on that list. And then if we're first on that list, then we can negotiate with that player to try and sign him. But if we're not first on that list, then someone else has the right to do that before us. Jesus. And so it's very, very, very hard to recruit. So it's not like if you like your team like a player and my team like a player, and we're willing to pay more, doesn't matter because it's a single entity league, so the players are really owned by the league. So why would they negotiate against themselves? So, but as the coach of a team, it makes it very hard to build a team. So one of the things is that when you're in an expansion season, it's so important to get it right with the players, because the players are the most important resource that you've really got, and the most valuable asset at the club are the players. And so in that expansion year, you have to get that right in order to build the team. And in Vancouver, it was hard to say that they necessarily did that, because there wasn't many players that continued on. They did get some, though, to be fair, but it was difficult. There weren't too many like domestic players that really could help the team. So recruitment's very hard. So you have to find players where you can, but you also then need to continue to play it how you want to play, but realize that you might have to work a little bit differently to get to the end result. And so there might be some games where you have to adjust how you play a bit in order to do well.
And people moan in the UK that they can't sign some players. And you guys have got it a lot harder.
Well, I've coached in multiple other leagues, and so I know how hard the MLS and how restrictive the MLS is compared to other leagues. And that's why sometimes teams that aren't good just never get good. And, you know, there are certain mechanisms to try and help those teams, but it doesn't mean to say that the opposing teams are going to really ever give up someone they really like.
No, definitely. And obviously, like you said, your time ended there for whatever reason, and then you ended up going to Seoul Eland. Explain a bit about that. And obviously, it's not your very well-known name, but just talk about your time there and kind of how much different was it from America?
Yeah, so again, it was an interesting story how it comes about, because we had a player on our team in Vancouver, YP Lee, who played for Tottenham, played for Borussia Dortmund, played 4 World Cups for South Korea. It's just an absolute. So he was playing for us, so that meant that sometimes there would be camera crews or people would come from Korea just because he was there. And there was the executives of this new club, Seoul Eland. They came to visit him, visit the club, and so on. And again, it's kind of random, but at that time I was in the middle of this like big ad campaign that was all over Vancouver. And this company, Eland, is a clothes company, and they'd seen all the billboards, and they're like, "Oh, this guy would be a good coach for us." And so, hopefully it was more than that, but that was one of the things that I think, like, okay. So when I finished coaching in Vancouver, they got in touch right away, and so I got the opportunity. I had a couple other things that were in the pipeline, but honestly, it was an opportunity that was just too good to be true, or too good to turn down, I should say. It was true, but basically, it was starting a team with a big company, a massive company in Seoul, living in the middle of Seoul, and it was an incredible experience. Like, very difficult because the language and the culture, but the standard of the players was fantastic. Like, far higher than any people outside of that region would ever realize. You know, the tactics and the qualities were brilliant. There's so many good players and so many similar players, and like, if they get out of there at a young age, like Son did, the Tottenham player, they can go on and do great things. It's just that when they stay there too long, they become a bit conservative in their play. They're scared to make mistakes, but their technical ability, their physical ability is fantastic, and they're much more dynamic and powerful than people think. People often from the Western world think of Asian players and they think of very small and weak, but Korean players are big, strong, powerful. So Korean and Japanese players and leagues are very, very good. So if you've ever coached in a K League or a J League, you can probably go anywhere else in Asia in the future if you want to. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was, like I say, very challenging, taught me a lot as a coach, as a person, saw lots of new ideas and lots of things that I hadn't thought of before. So again, just a really good learning experience. And if you want to be good at something, you want to have diverse experiences in order to try and develop. And that certainly gave me that.
And what was it? Did you move your whole family over there, or were you just over there yourself? Or how was that?
Yeah, it was good. The kids were in an international school. It's one of the best schools, honestly, in the world, because the Korean education system's just like off the charts. It's ridiculous. Like, it's all about education for these kids, and they go to school early in the morning. They're there all day, and then they go to school all the way late into the evening at like private schools. So it was really good. My kids obviously had to adapt and so on. But for all of us, it was like coming back to America or going back to Scotland, like life is a lot easier than it felt before, because when you're in a country where it's almost impossible to be understood, where you can't even read the road signs, where you don't understand why people are doing what they're doing, why the culture is like it is, living in the middle of a city of 25 million people, just getting around, driving somewhere, so difficult. So I think it equipped me well for many other things that I've gone on to do since then.
And did you find, you speak about quite a lot, and I looked at your career beforehand, I've always noticed that you've kind of had that, you can definitely look at any of your teams and go, oh, that's a Martin type of player, that's a blueprint, kind of what you've done. What was that like with your coaching staff? Did you try and surround yourself with very similar people? Did you bring any people out, or was it just people based from Korea that you had in your coaching staff?
Yeah, it was mainly people from Korea, but then I brought one coach who was like a coach, but also more of a fitness coach. His name was Dan Harris. He's been a coach at Celtic and Birmingham and other places. And I think he's now the academy director at Oxford, I believe. So he was a brilliant guy, really, really hard working. Really did a great job, and really we were building an entire team. Like, some of the stories I could tell you from there are just ridiculous. Like, we didn't have a training facility, and we were only a few months away from starting to need a training facility. And we got taken out to this big resort in the middle of the mountains. Beautiful place, river running through it, trees everywhere, right up there in the mountains. And they said, like, yeah, we're going to make this the training facility. And we were like, but there's not even a football pitch here. And oh, well, we're going to get rid of the car park. We're going to cut down those trees. We're going to build a pitch. And I was like, yeah, but we start training in 2 months. And they're like, yeah, well, it'll be ready. Came back, immaculate pitch, completely ready. We had the players, a lot of them in Korea, they just stay in the training facility. So they lived there in the hotel. Really? Yeah, and then we had the whole basement, which was all like our, changing rooms, our gym. They had like, steam room, sauna, all the stuff you can imagine. So they basically just completely converted this resort, and there we were out there training and playing reserve games and all that out there. So There was just so many things like that, which you had to experience it really to believe it. But they just did things like that, and it was pretty cool to see. They had a lot of money to use on whatever they needed. And one of the crazy things there was, I'd always wanted to do my UEFA Pro license, but when I was in America, I couldn't do it because the course in Scotland, at least, would always start on a Sunday and go like, say, Monday, Tuesday. But if I had a game on a Saturday night in America or Canada, by the time I'd flown, it would already be Monday, basically.
Yeah.
But in Korea, the time difference works the other way. So, like, I would have games, right, where I'd have the game maybe Saturday night, and I would finish at, say, 10 o'clock, have a shower, get in the car, get driven to the airport, and I would get on a flight at midnight, and it would fly to Amsterdam. I'd get there, get some breakfast, get on the flight from Amsterdam to Glasgow, come out of there, and basically, like, grab some food or whatever, straight in the rental car to wherever we were going, usually Hampden, where the course was. Yeah. And then I would be there all day listening to, like, Kevin Keegan, whoever the coach was, or the speaker. That night we'd have a little bit of work to do, go to bed. I'd be just dead at that point, get up the next day, do the whole day. And then at the end of that day, I'd get on a flight, go back to Korea, and I'd only missed like maybe 1 day's training or 2. Christ. So it was unreal. I reckon I went around the world about 6 times just doing that course. So, like, that's an example of, like, sometimes, honestly, on that particular case, I was like, why am I doing this? But on the other hand, I was like, well, you'll get this out of the way, it'll be done, and it's important qualification to have. And so you've got to make those sacrifices if you want to move forward in it, if you want to develop in it, if you want to get better at it. And I learned a lot on that course, met a lot of good people. Gary Caldwell, you mentioned, was on your podcast. Yeah. He was on that course. So nice. I think also was like, gave people who lived in Scotland or even England less of an excuse to
I was going to say, if you're traveling the whole bloody world.
Yeah, that was good.
But so then obviously your time there ended, and then did you go straight, you didn't go straight back into management, did you, or did you?
No, so when we came back, we went to Michigan, where my wife's from and where all her family are, and we just spent a bit of time enjoying it and relaxing and kind of just not rushing into anything. And
is that the thing you think people think massively, and people always say, oh, this coach has been out of the game for, I don't know, 2 years or a year. And like you said, you've just explained that you went around the world 6 times in probably about however long. You're traveling here, you're in the mountains one day, it's a 24-hour job. That year off is like everyone's weekend they have off. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's crazy to think about. But did you have opportunities during that time off before you then chose to take the position where you're at now?
Yeah, I did, and I think it is hard because you always feel like, oh, I might never get another chance, so I better take it.
Yeah.
But said, like, that time went by so fast, and it was so important. It was a really useful time. It was good to just take stock of everything I'd learned up to that point as a coach and as a person, and just kind of like think about how I wanted to do things going forward, and just also spending time with family and hanging out with friends and things. I remember watching an interview. It was a German coach, and he said something along the lines of, like, in the last 30 years, I've only been out of work for like maybe 1 year out of that whole time. And he said, if I had known that after that year was up, I would have been back in work, I would have enjoyed the year. I wouldn't have been so stressed. I wouldn't have been so worried. I'd have made the most of it. And I just thought, like, I'm going to try and do that. Like, just enjoy the time. If something really good comes up, I'll go for it. But then what I wanted to do, partly with the opportunity I have now, is it's close to, where we've got family and friends, and try and be somewhere to be settled, for my kids getting through school and all that. And then, it's a really good club. It's a club with a lot of ambition. We've had an approval for a new stadium.
Amazing.
We've got great training facilities. So the ambition's really high. So it's worked out to be a really good opportunity for me.
And obviously, you're at Indy at the moment. And if anyone doesn't realise, that's the USL Championship. And I've been following it quite a lot probably in the last kind of 6 months. During lockdown, I decided to educate myself on more different styles of play, different cultures. And I think people don't realise the USL, especially the Championship I've watched a lot of, it's very competitive. It's people think, and I do say, I wish there was a promotion, I wish there was a relegation, but that's just probably because I'm English. But the fact that there is none of that, it's so competitive still. And talk about kind of, obviously that's that one step before the MLS. So do you work with a lot of younger players that have the ability to go there and they see this as a platform to, if I do well here, I really can impress?
Yeah, definitely. I think the standard is a lot higher than people think. The athleticism is really, really high, and that's obviously a big part of football at an elite level is the athleticism. The tactical side of it's improved a lot. I think that within the USL Championship, you do have some teams that are really, really, really strong, and then others that are more just kind of developing and coming up.
Okay.
So there is a bit of a balance, but when the top teams play each other, the standard is really, really good. And what you find, like, if you think about, let's say England as an example, or you could use Scotland, there's certain clubs that are already established and they're pretty much going to win every year. Like, they're going to be the top teams. In Scotland, Rangers or Celtic are going to win the league pretty much. That in England, there's certain hierarchy, although it's changed a little bit recently with certain teams, and Leicester did that one incredible year. You pretty much know these are the teams that can compete.
Whereabouts?
They can't. A lot of times in USL, like, teams are going into games and they believe that they're better than the other team. And that makes a difference to the game. It makes it more competitive. It means that you might be winning. If you're at Man United and maybe bad example, but you're at, let's say, Liverpool, and you're winning 1-0 against a team that's not really expected to beat you, they're not coming at you minute after minute after minute they're kind of like, okay, if we lose 1-0, it's all right. Now, they wouldn't admit that, but subconsciously think that. Whereas in our league, it's like you could be winning 1-0, the other team's like going after it, like they believe they should be winning, they can't believe they're losing. So it makes all the games that you have to play till the last minute, makes it pretty exciting, and definitely not easy. And again, the travel and other things are challenges that maybe other leagues don't have.
So obviously the season's finished now. You're preparing now for the new season coming up. What's the aim for Indy 11 the upcoming season?
Yeah, well, obviously last season was a weird year because it was like COVID. We played less than half a season. We didn't play really hardly any of the teams. We just played a couple that are close by. So that year, I think, taught us a lot of things about how far we are along the pathway and where we still need to go. We've become one of the best teams in the USL, no doubt about that. We're places that players want to come to. We're well respected throughout the whole league and throughout the soccer community in America. So we're right there now. We want to see if we can become the best. So it's there's a bit of a process to that. Like, how do you get from being one of the best to being the best, and how do you stay there? And so that's where we really are now. Is we've got to try and take that step to become the best, and then we have to figure out how to stay being the best. And we're right there. We're on the verge of it. We believe the recruitment process right now is really important. We're working hard on that. And we've got some good players coming in. But at the same time, we have a lot of good players from before that were with our team that we know we can rely on and that we can build around. So it's exciting times, and hopefully, get a season where it's much more normal, where we have like proper schedule, where we have the same, full number of games and things like that. And hopefully, not just for football, but hopefully the world starts to get back to a bit more of what we expected before.
No, definitely, mate. So what I always like to do, which everyone's seen before, I normally come up with some quick fire questions. I want 1 or 2 word answers to reply to them. So in no particular order, best team you've ever played against as a manager?
LA Galaxy.
Yeah. What was that like? Was that like prime, like LA Galaxy? Like,
yeah, that was them at their absolute best with Beckham, Donovan, Keane, and then a whole bunch of other players that weren't maybe so famous, but were just top level. They were really good.
I've seen that. Is it Leggett? Is that?
Yeah, he's there now. Yeah.
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 Still to this day, and he's been there for a long time. He came from West Ham as a kind of academy reserve player, and he's shot for the sky. No, definitely, mate. Who's the best? You could give a couple here. Who's the best players you've ever coached?
I think YP Lee, the player from South South Korea, was really interesting just because of the background he had and how good he was. Camilo Sanvizo would be up there. But it's hard because you start leaving out a whole bunch of really good. Those two I thought were really good.
The best game you've ever been involved in?
Ooh, let me think.
I'm putting you on the spot now.
For me, we went and played Seattle Sounders in a game, and sometimes in games we played them, you could have a full house, so 65,000 at the Seahawks Stadium. And we played a young player, I think he was 18 years old. We gave him one of his first games, and he scored a hat-trick. We won 3-0. That was one I remember, and maybe not the best as in back and forth games, but probably the one I like the most.
If you can manage any team in the world, who would it be? Or what teams you admire the most at the moment?
I think for me, like, the ultimate goal would be to coach in England at the highest level with one of the top teams. And so I wouldn't want to say one in case it gets thrown back another time if it gets to that point. But that, as an English-speaking person, coaching in Scotland, but also ultimately I think even Scottish managers would like to coach in England if they can. So that would be any top team in that country would be great. And obviously that's obviously in some ways a long way off, but it's not as far away necessarily as going from coaching PDL to all the way to where I've got to, so you never know.
And last one, when you retire and you're actually retired and you're never going to go back to coaching ever again, what's the one thing you want to be remembered by as Martin the coach?
Yeah, hopefully that I help people, develop as a player, but also grow as a person, and they can look back. And hopefully, I feel like I've already had a lot of players who I've worked with who call me now and say like, "Oh, that was a great year in my life, or a great couple of years, and you really helped me maybe change my perspective on some things, and that's helping me in my life now." So hopefully that I had a positive impact on the people that I worked with. Unfortunately, as a coach, that won't always happen. You're sometimes going to do your best, but it's good for one, but it's bad for another. And sometimes you're making those positive decisions that have negative consequences on other people. So it's not always possible, but that is what I would like to do if I could.
No, mate, amazing. But yeah, that's wrapped up there. But guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, been following Martin's journey for a long time now, and especially soccer in America and how different it is, but how impressive it is. Guys, don't forget to subscribe and like and comment down who you want to see next on the podcast. But yeah, Martin, cheers, pal. It's been great.
You're welcome. Thank you.